Hunter x Hunter is the anime I think of when I hear amazing fights. Some fights have great strategy, others have interesting abilities, others have great storytelling, and the best fights have all three. But my favourite fight in this series is Silver and Zeno vs Chrollo Lucifer. Silver and Zeno vs Chrollo isn't special in terms of storytelling. In fact, this fight feels like it comes out of nowhere with two characters we barely talk about, and once it's done, the characters and series move on almost like it never happened. It also isn't special in terms of interesting abilities. I mean, these characters can do cool stuff, but it's dwarfed by the creativity you'd find later on in the series. However, this fight does have great strategy. This isn't the only fight in the series where Togashi writes impressive battle strategy. However, this is the fight I remember more than any other. Why? Because I'm a fighting game player. I've played fighting games competitively for several years. After that much time playing, it's become easy to see how mindsets and strategies present in other competitive environments can mirror the mindsets and strategies needed to succeed in fighting games. But most of the time those parallels are minor, things that can be easily generalized, something like, in a stressful situation, don't use the first move you think of because your opponent probably thought of it too. But the strategies used in this fight between Silver, Zeno, and Chrollo go much further than minor parallels. Many of the decisions they make, as well as their reasons for making those decisions, feel incredibly familiar with the scenarios I run into when I play fighting games. I'm excited to talk about it, so let's get straight into it. First, a bit of context. Silver and Zeno are members of the Zodic family, a very small family but known for being some of the deadliest assassins in the world. They're also the dad and granddad of main character Killua. They've been hired to take down Chrollo Lucifer, the leader of a very small but very infamously deadly group, the Phantom Troop, because the troop are currently making life hell for the rich people in the city. Immediately, you'll notice that this fight is 2-on-1, not a staple for fighting games. Like, this genre does have puppet characters that can make it a 2-on-1, but that won't be super relevant here. Points for Silver trying to OTG Chrollo, but I'm focusing on when it primarily becomes a 1v1, Zeno versus Chrollo. Chrollo doesn't know what Zeno is capable of, and Zeno doesn't know what Chrollo is capable of. In fighting game terms, neither character here knows the matchup, but this fight is happening anyway and they're gonna have to play around their lack of knowledge. You'll find yourself in this scenario a lot if you play fighting games, especially if you're playing Tekken 8. But enough, let's start. Zeno begins to approach Chrollo, focusing his aura into his hand. We don't know what he's trying here and neither does Chrollo, but Chrollo concludes that he won't be able to block the next attack. It's a reasonable assumption to make. Funnily enough, I make the same assumption if I see a fighting game character charging something up for an unusually large amount of time. I don't know for sure what's about to hit me, I don't know if it really is unblockable, but the fight has already begun, and if they're showing that threat, what can I quickly do to avoid this situation? This is the predicament that Chrollo finds himself in, but here's how he responds. Chrollo uses his Nen ability to conjure Bandit's Secret, the book that hosts all of the abilities he's stolen from other characters. As a response to Zeno, he summons this cloth. We have no idea why he chooses this cloth, and Zeno has no idea what it's even capable of, but now that it's been presented, Chrollo is forcing Zeno to join him in playing mind games. Because what's Chrollo doing with this cloth? He's just holding it in front of him. We don't have any reason that Zeno shouldn't just keep approaching him. This very well could just be a random sheet of cloth. But Chrollo's summoning of this cloth does succeed in stopping Zeno from approaching. I think this situation parallels fighting games in two ways. One parallel is the fighting game strategy of controlling space. At a competitive level, many of the actions people take aren't immediately about trying to hit your target. A basic example would be continuously using a poke, a long-range attack, to communicate, "This area is dangerous, proceed at your own risk," and this, understandably, causes players to pause. There's a multitude of reasons any player would want to control space. Commonly, players use it to catch opponents predictably trying to move around that space, but another reason you might control space is to protect yourself from dangerous attacks that are effective in that area. Summoning this cloth, Zeno's pause may be exactly what Chrollo was looking for. Chrollo isn't somehow trying to block Zeno's unblockable attack. He's chosen an option that would caution Zeno away from even attempting to use that attack. To take it a step further, literally, the manga and anime equally emphasize Chrollo taking a step forward after Zeno has paused. Why so much emphasis on this step forward? This is another moment that I see best through the lens of a fighting game player. It parallels dare I say it, neutral. It parallels the mind games behind movement in neutral. I feel like a madman writing this, to be honest. In fighting games, moving forwards will always communicate something. If someone approaches me, they're inadvertently telling me that they want to be close, for whatever reason that may be. Maybe they're a rushdown character, so their tools work best when they're near me. Or maybe a zoner is rushing me down because there's 10 seconds left on the clock and they don't want to lose to a timeout. Either way, you can always deduce something from someone choosing to approach you. This step forward is an aggressive move in mind games from Chrollo, because again, Zeno still does not know what this cloth does or why Chrollo is now stepping forwards. He can interpret that step in multiple ways. Is Chrollo not afraid of the aura in Zeno's hand? Does the cloth counter Nen in some way? Is he trying to close the gap so the cloth can be in its effective range? That one step forwards is doing additional work in sending the message, this cloth is dangerous, stay away from it. Is it dangerous? Who knows, but it's on Zeno to adjust accordingly. Try and picture this scenario in a fighting game. Your opponent just brought out this very showy tool. It's just sitting there and you aren't sure how it's going to react when you go near it. What should you do? The answer is exercise caution, but more importantly, what does exercise caution look like to you? For many, exercising caution in a fighting game is pausing. It's slowing down and stopping your game plan to observe the opponent. Well, here's what Zeno has to say to that method of exercising caution. I should be careful until I know what it does. Or so the average person would think. Zeno is a high-level player, I can tell you that. He said it right there. If you're the kind of player that stops attacking to exercise caution, you might be average. He wouldn't be wrong. I mean, I don't mean to badger anyone that does this. Fighting games are tough and it's all part of the process of improving. I also don't think people are conscious that they end up playing this way. But sometimes it needs to be pointed out. When some players encounter a matchup they're unfamiliar with, they may play too slowly and lack any aggression while they're busy trying to play safe. That's a trap. Exercising caution doesn't necessarily mean slowing down. I think a better way to face these situations is by doing something like what Zeno does next. It's a great choice. Zeno wouldn't want to recklessly approach Chrollo, but it would be a bad move to pause the exact way Chrollo is expecting. There's always a middle ground, and Zeno's middle ground is to use projectiles. This way, he can keep attacking Chrollo without taking the risk to interact with this mysterious cloth. I feel funny saying this, but in fighting game terms, Zeno summoned Dragonhead because it has no hurt box, because it's disjointed. Describe it however you want. Either way, it's another tactic that you'll see in fighting games. The low risk behind projectiles make them a common and great way to keep the opponent on guard while you use that time to think. You're especially more likely to see projectiles in abundance when someone puts something dangerous on the field, in a similar way Chrollo's done with the cloth. Zeno attacks, throwing Dragon Lance at Chrollo to mitigate the risks while keeping him on his toes. Again, what is this cloth? None of us know how it'll interact with Dragon Lance, but Chrollo's response to Dragon Lance will tell us a lot. As the Dragon Lance approaches, Chrollo dodges. But Dragon Lance is kind of like Zappa's sword, that thing keeps coming so Chrollo has to keep dodging. This response is the last key to the puzzle for Zeno, who has analysed every single action taken by Chrollo thus far. He deduces, he's shown no signs of taking the offensive, but he's trying to close the gap between us. So, it's a defensive tool that can be used to close the distance and counterattack. There are multiple ways to interpret the step forwards Chrollo made after summoning the cloth, but Zeno's interpretation is representative of his status as a veteran. This cloth didn't protect Chrollo. It didn't nullify or reflect Dragon Lance. As Zeno said, despite displaying this cloth and stepping forwards, Chrollo has yet to actually take the offensive. It's likely that he stepped forwards because he can only take the offensive. The cloth only becomes useful once Chrollo has indeed closed the gap. After figuring this out, Zeno has the same thought that any good fighting game player would have in this moment. And there you have it. Zeno is a zoner. If that new Hunter x Hunter fighting game is a 2D fighter, prepare for numerous tweets about how Zeno is broken and unbeatable. But Zeno is right. He's no idiot, this is a fight between dangerous assassins. Why approach Chrollo if he has no reason to? This parallel to fighting games is so obvious that, I don't think it needs an explanation. It's pretty evident once you witness this kind of character in action. They're not going to approach unless you give them a reason to. From here on, Zeno continues to harass Chrollo from a distance until Chrollo is forced to close the book and do away with the cloth. Before I started writing this video, I initially believed that the cloth was useless because Chrollo never managed to close the gap. However, even though Chrollo was unable to use this cloth at a closer range, it was successful in thwarting off Zeno's initial attack that Chrollo believed he couldn't block. Sometimes the threat of a tool is good enough. Even if you never end up using said tool, its existence is enough to stop the opponent in their tracks. In fighting games, despite saying earlier that projectiles are generally low risk, and they are, I often stop using them when my opponent builds a lot of meter gauge because that's when they can use super moves to punish me from far away. Projectiles are a core part of many characters' game plans, but once you gain a tool that could make it dangerous for them to use those projectiles, you don't actually have to use that tool. The existence of that tool alone is enough to fend off their attacks. The same way Chrollo's cloth, even if he never got to use it, was able to fend off Zeno. But why am I praising Chrollo? He's the one in a bad situation right now. At this point, 2 minutes have passed. Everything I've covered so far is 2 minutes in real time when watching the show. It speeds by. So much of the great decision making in this fight is hard to notice on the first watch, but this is the kind of Hunter x Hunter fight that holds a lot of extra value on a rewatch. However, we're nearing the conclusion of the fight. Silver rejoins the fight, searching for the moment that Chrollo leaves himself open while dodging Dragonlance, but Chrollo doesn't give Silver that kind of opportunity. So, what Silver does next is cheap. It's fantastic, it's a great idea from Silver, but it's also kind of funny, because he just sparks his Nen up to 1000 like a flashbang, basically forcing Chrollo to look at him for just a second that Zeno uses to catch him with Dragonlance. Game over. The fight basically ends there. Spoilers for like the next episode. If you've seen the show, you know that they pretty much stopped fighting at the last second because the people that hired Silver and Zeno in the first place just got killed by Silver's son, Illumi, because Chrollo hired Illumi because he knew the people that hired Silver and Zeno would try and use them to kill him, but they've been killed, so now the contract is gone and Silver and Zeno don't care to kill Chrollo. Yes, that's how Hunter x Hunter works. Amazing series, I do recommend. There are several fights in Hunter x Hunter that deserve analysis of all kinds. However, this one will always be my favorite because I feel like I'm watching two fighting game players duke it out. The only difference is that at least I'm made privy to each character's thoughts, but if I turned off the audio and subtitles, maybe the fight would look as confusing as fighting games can sometimes look. But the reason I love Togashi's fights is because he cares about the thought process. I don't watch Hunter x Hunter for good choreography. I watch them to know the 3-minute explanation behind why a character decided to throw a punch instead of a kick. Those same kinds of thought processes are why I love playing fighting games. It's just a shame I don't get to have my own subtitles for people to see while I play. Thank you for watching a video that I cannot tell how this will go. But it was a fun write, and if you enjoyed it, I would appreciate a like or a comment. And if you want to hear more about fighting games from me, then just subscribe. And if you want to support me with a donation, the link to my Ko-fi is in the description. But otherwise, again, thanks for watching and have a nice day.